Hello,
Good
everyone.
morning.
This is. Let me
Go
get my
ahead, Steve.
Oh, go ahead. I was just saying that we don't have, since Derek left as the board, we don't have a chairman for the committee. My suggestion, if it meets with the approval of my colleagues on the committee, is that as we proceed and do the votes and start the meeting, I could act as temporary chairman, and then in our next board meeting, we would deal with the permanent chairmen of the committees, just to get us through this meeting. Is everyone okay with that?
Oh yeah, this is Yolanda. I'm okay with that.
Great, thanks, Yolanda. Okay, so in that case, we're calling the meeting to order. And the first item would be the agenda item number 1, calling to order, establishment of quorum. So, Christy, do you want to call the vote on that?
I sure will. Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. Steve Weeks.
Steve Weeks, present.
Yolanda Jimenez.
Present.
And Tanya Fairley.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Terrific. That being the case, then let's go to agenda item number 2. And our number 1 is the establishment of a quorum. And now we have to approve the minutes of the last meeting. So has everyone had an opportunity to look over the rather extensive minutes of the last meeting?
Yes, I read them.
Any questions you may have?
No, none.
Okay, all right. That being the case, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve.
I second.
Okay. And now, because we're open to the public, do we have is there then now the opportunity for public to comment on this, or is that not necessary in this?
Yes, now's that time.
Okay. In that case, let's turn it over for any public comment relating to our last committee minutes.
And this is the moderator. If anyone logged in to WebEx would like to make a comment on the minutes or the motion, you may do so by looking for the question mark icon at the lower right of your computer screen, or behind the 3-dot other options if you're on a mobile device. And call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand, or anyone may raise their hand. Each person will have 2 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning. Are there any comments on the minutes? I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the comment feature?
Please do.
Thank you.
That being the case, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the amendments, so we should vote on that.
All right, I will call the attendance for the vote. Steve Weeks.
Yes.
Yolanda Jimenez.
Yes.
And Tanya Fairley.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes.
Excellent. In that case, let's move to what can be a rather extensive agenda item number 3. Before we do this, I have a quick question for Christy. I was wondering,
yes.
Does this current rain state of emergency have any effect on the board's public issues or staffing? What are we going through right now in Sacramento?
Well, we're hoping the power lasts through our meetings today. That's our most desirable thing right now. We all are working from home, other than a few people that are in our office. We, as a state agency, we always have to remain open. So we do have, I want to say about 4 or 5 staff that are physically in our office in case we have any public counter and coverage for our office. But for the rest of our staff, we are all working from home, and we do have several staff that are currently without power still today, but we're trucking ahead and moving forward.
How are my fellow board members doing in this rain?
I'm okay. I'm in Sacramento too. The school districts, some of the school districts closed, but my school district didn't. So we're on campus today, but their water is right outside my door. There's a huge lake right outside my door, and we've been watching it all morning, hoping that it doesn't flood into our classroom.
Oh, my goodness. Well, put your life preserver on. We need you for this meeting. We can't afford to lose you to the weather.
As long as the Wi-Fi holds out, I will be okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. We'll all hope for that. We'll all hope for that. Let's start on agenda number 3. And Christy, I know you have a rather extensive presentation on that. And let me say, in looking over that presentation, a lot of staff work, a lot of staff hours have gone into this. And the reward of that we are reaping is some very valuable information. So maybe you can walk us through what this actually means.
Yes. So, as this committee knows, we have talked about pass rates for quite some time, and quite honestly, as long as I've been with the board, we've always had a concern with our Spanish pass rates ever since we were able to start really looking at pass rates more specifically by the Spanish pass rates. And this is something board members that have been around for a while or past board members know that it comes up in every one of our sunset reviews. And then we had some major changes in 2022 with the reduction of the hours and with a new exam in July. So we started diving deeper into seeing what could we really do. We have several board members that are going through the Senate confirmation process, and that's definitely going to be a topic that's going to rise up as well, is our pass rates. And one of the things that I found that we do that not a lot of other boards do is we really have the ability to dive very deep into some of this data. We can obviously separate it by language. We can separate it by first-time test takers, multiple-time test takers, if they went to school in California, and so on. And so what we started to do is we started to think, like, what could we do better to try to get schools to improve pass rates? And then as we started going through, that's what kind of resulted in this report that you have in front of you today. And when it's interesting, because when you look at on page 1 of the memo, when you look at the overall pass rate of our exam pass rates, which is just pass and fail. We don't separate anything. We don't look at apprentice. We don't look at schools. It's just our overall pass rate. The pass rate has changed a little in 2022, but not by much. We, of course, expect to see pass rates decline when a new exam is put out. And so this overall pass rate, if we had been looking at this, we probably wouldn't be have too many concerns. But as you see, as you move on, we do report Spanish pass rates. And so we're not going to go away from reporting Spanish pass rates because we see the concern. And so you can see that our Spanish pass rates do have obviously some issues that we've talked about extensively. Our apprentice pass rates are very low. And then when you look at schools only, they tend to do a little better. One of the things that we've noticed with the newer exam is the barber exam pass rates being lower than what we'd like to see them. And so that's where we really started looking at the individual schools to see, is there a possibility we could do something with these individual schools to try to help them improve their pass rates? Obviously, you have a lot of data in front of you. One of the things that we started looking at was what is our authority to really try to get into these schools to try to improve some of the pass rates. And really, it's minimal. And I think we might have hit on a newer problem, not a newer problem, it's kind of something that we've always known. In past sunset reviews, our board has asked for sole oversight of schools several times and has not been successful. And so we do have authority over schools, but it is limited. We approve their curriculum, And that curriculum is set in statute. And prior to that being set in statute, it was set in regulation. So a school has the opportunity to get approved fairly easily. They have to have a location. They have to have minimum equipment. They have to establish a curriculum that we basically tell them what to establish. So where there might be some issues is what's happening after these schools get approved. We do not have a renewal for schools. So if they change things when 10 years later, we have no idea. Obviously, the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary has much more oversight of our schools. They actually have a quality of education unit. One of the things, and you can see in the recommendations, is that we can start referring schools to the BPPE. I have talked to them about this, that we have schools that have had notorious low passage rates for years and years. And so that, while we've sort of known this, that is one of the things why I attached the various charts that are attached to the memo, is to show board members, this is by school. So we have pass-fail rates by school. And if you look through this, and it's a lot of information, but if you look through it, you can see that there are some schools that are performing poorly, but that have been performing poorly since 2019. And 2019 is as far back as we went. We went back to 2019 because that was pre-COVID pandemic. 2020, a lot of schools had a lot of issues, and then 2021, we're kind of recovering. So we wanted to at least show what was going on in 2019, and it raised a lot of concerns. It raised some concerns that there are schools that never get over the 30% pass rate. And so then what is the board's authority to even do anything about this? So my concern is that we are constantly questioned about the pass-fail rates in our schools and about our exams. Our exam is verified by the Office of Professional Examination Services with the Department of Consumer Affairs. So it's not like this exam is just something that we made up on our own, obviously. It's a national exam. We use PSI. PSI is given in at least 8 other states. And again, other states don't track their pass-fail rates the way that we do here in California. Some states we found, as I think we talked about this at our last committee meeting, don't track pass-fail rates at all, which is very interesting. But we wanted to kind of talk today about some of the issues that we're seeing and kind of talk about the fact that the board is, we could pull up data till we're blue in the face, in a sense. And we can modify this data in several different ways. We can pull this data overall, and it doesn't look that bad. We can pull this data by schools, it doesn't look that bad. But when it comes to the authority for what we get to do to try to improve these scores is where the board has limited authority. We don't have the authority to go into schools and look at their quality of education. And we do not have the authority, our authority lies in health and safety and going in and inspecting schools for health and safety. And that is because most schools, not all, but most schools have what we call a clinic floor, which is where consumers go in and receive services from students. And we want to make sure those consumers are safe because our goal is consumer safety. So I thought this report was very interesting in the way that we put it together to kind of show that we have a big issue, but our issue might be one that we're never going to be able to accomplish any improvements without some statutory changes of our oversight of schools. And again, I've met with the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary. We work with them very closely. And I can't speak. I did list some of their authority in this memo, but I'm certainly not an expert in their laws and regulations. I don't have all of their information. But one of the things I would like to bring to your attention is if you go to the charts that we provided, all those colorful charts about school pass-fail rate, and if you turn to page 6 for our cosmetology pass rates by school. And again, these are numbered, and this is all public information. We post schools' pass-fail rates on our website under our schools tab, and we post that by the school name. I didn't think it was necessary for this meeting to actually list the name of schools for every one of these, but each one of these numbers down the left column represents a school. And if you go to, for instance, on page 6 of the charts, number 7, you see a school that has had very low attendance. And so that's another question that we've seen come up in looking at these specific schools. School number 17, the same, is how are these schools staying in business with such low numbers of attendees? So that kind of raises some questions on our side, because what are these schools doing with only 3 to 5 graduates a year? When you look at some of the other schools where they're in the hundreds, and there are definitely some small schools out there, but when you have only 3 graduates, 5 graduates in a year, it makes us wonder how rent is being paid at a school that has to be a certain amount of square footage. So that's another issue. And that is something that we are going to look into. We can do inspection of these schools to see what's going on. But the discussion really today is the issue that we are asked about pass-fail rates. And I am concerned that we just don't have the authority to try to improve these pass-fail rates. And the committee may want to discuss more, asking for more authority on this topic so that we can do something about some of these schools.
Okay, great. The question, looking at the numbers themselves, I think the first issue that we have to resolve is recognition of the problem of low school rates, to pass that to the board. And we've been dealing, as you mentioned, low Hispanic rates for maybe even decades. I mean, a very long time we've been looking at that. We blamed it on, in the past, we've tried to find a reason for this to be happening, and we thought it was composition of the test, language difficulties, apprentice education. Every few months it seemed to change as to what's causing this problem. And now we're dealing with, your numbers point out, a very low pass rate on a significant number of our approved schools. And for cosmetologists, for example, that 2022 overall pass rate that you reflected was 41% of the approved schools have a pass rate less than 50%. And the problem with that, it's a problem for the schools, it's a problem for our consumer students and us and the whole state. So I just want to make sure we clearly understand where we're looking at with these numbers. A couple questions there. Are all of these numbers first-time test takers, or we're finding people that are added back, maybe taking it 2 or 3 times in the numbers?
I'm sorry, Steve, could you repeat that question?
I'm sorry, are all of these numbers that we're showing there, are they all first-time test takers, or some of these people taking this for multiple times, the same person over and over?
These are combined. So we didn't at this point separate first-time test takers and multiple-time test takers.
It doesn't look like you took ethnicity into account on these particular numbers so we can deal with Hispanic number. Okay.
Correct. And something else that's interesting about Spanish is, we don't approve the schools to teach in another language. We just approve schools. We have no idea if they, but the Bureau does. So if you're teaching in Spanish or Vietnamese, you have to be approved for that. But one of the things that's interesting is the textbooks are translated into Spanish and Vietnamese. But if you go into a school that is teaching in Spanish, you don't always find that they're teaching with the Spanish textbook. A lot of schools find it easier to use the English textbook. I'm not sure why. Again, we don't have that information. So that's another thing that we don't have access to, is who's teaching in Spanish, and what are they doing. Now, we do know some of them because we are so ingrained in looking
Right.
at this data. I can tell you, I know off the top of my head several schools that teach in Spanish. And there is a possibility that we could do that. Well, there's not a possibility. There's definitely an avenue for us to do regulations without statutory authority.
Right.
And we could do regulations to increase our application process, what we require for applications. That is something we would have to work with legal counsel on. Our reg counsel has already met with me, and she had various ideas of what we could do to strengthen our authority over schools based on regulation only, which of course is often easier to do than getting a bill to change the statute. However, one of the other items I want to mention is that, which we all know, we don't get a fee for these applications. So every schoolwork that we do is considered unfunded because we don't charge a fee, we don't get a renewal fee. So right now we have 2 analyst positions that work on schools, and that's taking away from our enforcement unit, because they're technically enforcement positions that we have redirected to schools. So that's one thing we have to change. If we're going to continue to do this work on schools, we have to ask the legislature for a fee for schools.
Can I ask a question? I mean, because this has been a big thing for me too, and I'm looking at these, looking at this chart, and I know that you had stated, and we talked about this before, going through everything we went through because the board gets blamed for so many things in regards to, why the person isn't passing or failing. I think my biggest concern is that we know that there's an issue with the schools. Like, I feel like that's a big start right there. We know there's an issue with the schools. We know there are schools that are funding, only 2 and 3 people for the year have taken a test. So we already know that there is something wrong with the schools. And I know that our capacity is limited, but it seems like we should be able to work closer with the BPE to first weed out the schools that are not performing in general. Because I think that if we keep up at this pace that we're at right now, we're going to keep having all this data, and the data is not doing anyone really any good other than saying that we have these non-performing schools. And what's the point and the purpose at this point? The second thing is, why don't the schools have to renew? We have to renew our license. So why don't the schools have to renew in order to maintain the same, that they're passing on the same information that we're required to? Safety, sanitation for our consumers, the same thing for the schools. I think that would be a big thing for me. And then we can kind of get to a place to where we have more confidence in the schools and what's being taught and how it's being taught. We also talked about that a lot of the schools who teach in Spanish, but the students will go take the test in English. So therefore creating another issue in the testing process. So I'm looking at this data, and my head is hurting because I'm just like, OM Jesus. It's like we keep unearthing more and more things. But if we start at the foundation, the base of it isn't, it may be the person taking the test, because I have a live example of someone I know who's taken the test 3 times and failed, but figured out she has this dyslexia. Everybody on this list does not have dyslexia.
Right.
There is a problem from when the schools are getting approved to their students taking the test. And if we're not holding the schools accountable, then what are we doing?
I 100% agree. And I agree that every time we pull data in a different way, it becomes a bigger can of worms that we're opening, but I completely agree with what you said, Tanya. And there's some really good schools out there, as you can tell by the charts. There are schools that are, we have some brand new schools that are operating that are doing 100% pass rates right now. And I do think we're going to see some, 2022, a lot happened. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how 2023 goes, because schools are just now, for the most part, we're getting the 1,000-hour graduates coming in to take the test. So that's another thing that unfortunately we can't pull that data. We cannot pull the data by student to see if a student that's continuing to fail was 1,000-hour or was a 1,600-hour. That's individual. I can tell you, I personally have been looking at it on a weekly basis, but to go through, because we have to look at every single record in order to see that, we're still seeing a lot of students coming through the exam that were from the 1,600 and the 1,500-hour courses. So that's another added step that's in this data that we can't pull out because we don't have that data in Breeze. So we can't say this many students are passing at this rate that took that are in a 1,000-hour course. We don't have that data. So I do think 2023, we're going to see schools get better with the new exam, with the 1,000 hours. We did a Barber town hall. We saw the Barber pass rates go up some from after we had that. We're getting ready to do a Cosmo school town hall. Those town halls are with the exam vendor, where they go over the content with instructors, with the schools. So early February, first week of February, I believe we just scheduled a town hall for the cosmetology exam to try to get those up. And so I think we're going to see some changes in 2023, but that's what's interesting in looking at these reports going back to 2019. The schools that had 30% pass rate in 2019 are not likely going to all of a sudden have a 70% pass rate. I mean, we hope they do. We hope they're wanting to improve. One other thing I wanted to mention, and it's coming up in a later meeting that we have today in our Education and Outreach Committee meeting, is we did do a pamphlet to hand out on how to choose a school. One of the things that we also don't look at is accreditation. Schools that get accredited, we have no idea. We have no idea who's accredited. We don't get that information. Again, we kind of know because we look them up ourselves, but it's not a requirement for us. At the Bureau, there's a different process if you're accredited and if you're not accredited. So the Bureau does know, they approve you based on accreditation. So, and obviously if you're an accredited school, that means you're usually student aid. But again, we don't have any of that information, so we don't know which schools are accredited. I can tell you that some of the schools on these lists are accredited and have low passage rates, which it's the accreditation company that is supposed to be monitoring passage rates, and they have a minimum requirement for what schools are supposed to maintain in order to maintain their accreditation. So that's another issue as well. But again, we don't even work with the accreditation companies, so we don't know who those schools are, in a sense. So we wanted to provide information to potential students on how to pick a school and to look at those pass-fail rates. And so that's going to be in another meeting, but I think the Education Committee is going to really like that. We did that for, something to give students a way to look up, telling them, look, we have this information online. We have pass-fail rates online. Look at schools, look at their pass-fail rates, look at accreditation. We're explaining what accreditation is to try to give students more insight into how, when they choose to go to school, and how to pick a good school.
So Christy, online, are the schools listed by name with their pass-fail rate? Okay, that's good. That's better. At least they know if it's a school that is trending in the way as far as education to get them
Right.
to the next level. I just think the big concern overall is these schools are still there, that they, I mean, what accountability do they have? I looked at it a lot the other day, but, you know, I'm looking at this significant change in some of these schools that have, if you look at 2019, that had a 43% pass rate, and then in 22, a 32% pass rate. So they were low to begin with, and they're going lower
Right.
with less students.
Right.
Christy, what is your professional consideration as to what would be an acceptable pass rate?
I have to look into that further. I have always thought around 60 to 65 is kind of the norm. But I'll be honest, I don't know why I think that. So it's definitely something that we'd like to talk to more. And I do believe that the accreditation company is a little higher than that. But we're going to reach out to them and to other organizations to try to see if we could determine what would be a pass rate. Because, and then, you know, then there's also the issue, if you look at these charts about the different schools, is there's a school that does really poorly, but one year had 2 candidates and they both happened to pass. So then they've got that 100% pass rate in there. So it's just, and schools fluctuate. I mean, a school will fluctuate. We've seen this historic. They're, for whatever reason, you know, maybe instructors change, maybe the student body changes, who knows? I'm sure schools in the year 2022 look very different than what that looked like in the 1980s. So the schools change as well. And I think if we went back even further on these years, we would see it kind of roller coaster around. So we really tried to look at these ones that are really staying low, like Tanya mentioned, these ones that are low to begin with and now getting lower, of what's really going on in those schools. But I think we have to do a little more research to determine what a good pass rate would be.
Well, I assume apprentices don't figure into your numbers at all, and that's a whole separate question.
That's a whole separate, I mean, obviously we know the issues with the apprentice program as well.
What, do we not have some measure of oversight perhaps now when we consider curriculum? Maybe that's our inroad into this. Maybe what we need to have or consider talking about is a more broadly defined what curriculum actually is. And you know, looking it up, it's like it's systematic and intended packages of competencies that students should acquire.
Right.
Well, if these schools are not showing competency in curriculum, their failure rates would demonstrate that some schools are not teaching a curriculum that has been tested for many years and proven successful. So the very definition of a trade school is to provide curriculum and education to earn a vocational license. So if they are not earning vocational license, can't we not assume that they aren't getting proper curriculum then? And that could be our inroad into that school.
I think that's definitely something we can look at. Curriculum, we used to have our curriculum and regulation prior to January 1 of 2022 when SB 803 went into effect. And that curriculum was moved into statute. So the curriculum is specific in statute. But I don't think that that means that we can't do regulation on expanding more of a educational plan that schools look at. So one of the things that's interesting that the Bureau looks at is they look at the entire educational program for a school. So not only do they look at their curriculum that are set in our statute, which is 100 hours of health and safety, 100 hours of disinfection and sanitation. They also look at how are you going to teach it? Give us a teaching plan. They look at a lot more than what we do as well. But one of the things, again, is we've met with the Bureau and we've looked at some applications that have been submitted in the past and they look perfect. So a lot of schools can do everything that they need. They can hire consultants to put their applications together. And on paper, they look like the world's most perfect school, but are they executing it? And that's where we get into that quality of education that we don't have the authority on, but the Bureau does. And that's one of the things I've talked to about them is, and they've asked me for a list of schools that we would want them to look at that have these super low pass rates, because there's clearly a problem of quality of education.
And that's my concern. Like, my biggest concern is if we're going to take on the brunt of looking at the test scores and determining what's going on, if these students are having to take the test 2-3 times, then there comes a point where we have to put the onus and the responsibility back on the school and say, hey, here is your data. Your data says in 2022, you had 24 students take the test and only 2 passed. Those 2 out of 24, it's unacceptable. And hold them accountable for bringing up those pass-fail rates, and hold them accountable for making sure that the enrollees or the students are actually attending and they're not just passing them on because of whatever reason. I think that's the frustrating part now, is that we've changed the test. We've gone through COVID. There's a lot that has happened. And right now is the better time to hold everyone accountable. I mean, if we could call it a fresh start, but holding them accountable for this fresh start, if that's the way we're going to move with this. But I also feel like our hands are tied in the event of really having a larger say-so or influence on how, and like you said, a statute, a regulation would maybe in order for us to kind of come up with so that we can have a little bit more say on the direction of how the schools are going to be held accountable for this.
Right.
On schools with alarmingly low pass rates and consistently low pass rates, can't we go back to these schools and say, your students are not passing in the proper numbers that they should be passing, were you to teach our curriculum, and just refuse to accept for testing any student from that school or put them on some sort of probation or something? Could we do that with our internal regulations without going back for a real rework?
Not today. We could not do that. We would not have the authority to do that.
Does a school make additional money from a student if they don't pass? I mean, they go back for extra classes or prep classes again?
They could. I don't know that. I don't know that happens, though. I don't know.
A lot of the schools don't do that, Steve. A lot of schools will allow the students to come back and test. To do practice tests and all that.
Without charge.
I know firsthand a few. Like Chrissy said, we have some good schools out there.
Right.
It's not those schools that are a concern. It's the schools that have and I'm looking at this list, even the schools from 2019 that had low pass rates still have low pass rates in 21 and 2022. So I think that is a good place to start. Measure-wise, as far as looking at those, because people will first thing they say, well, we've had COVID. Okay, well, let's look at before COVID, because before COVID, you were at I'm looking at this one school that's a 42% pass rate in 2019. And the reality of it is that they've been a low pass rate for a long time. So people will make that excuse and try to kind of, go around what is needed. If we're concerned about consumer safety, and if we are really advocating for these students, people who are taking the time out to take these tests and to go to these schools, then we have to have some responsibility to make sure that these schools are providing them with an education that is conducive to, one, the money they're paying and the time and energy they're putting into it. If we're not going to do that, if we're not going to hold them responsible, then why have a school? Just let everybody have the book and go take the test.
Right.
Well, what is the next step this committee should do? Are we at the point, do we want to discuss it more as a committee? Do we want to bring any of this to the board meeting later in the month? How can we keep this moving?
So there's a couple things we could do. The committee could, I think one thing that we need is we need a statutory change to require schools to renew and to require an application fee and a renewal fee for schools. That would take a statutory change. And I think that is something the board could, or the committee could recommend to the board. I then also think that staff need to come up with regulations that we think could strengthen our school program and bring it back to this committee to discuss. But I think regardless, we have to have a fee. We have to get funding for staff to be able to do more with our schools.
I totally agree. I totally agree that there should be a fee. I also believe that there should be a renewal process. And I think a part of that renewal process is look at the pass-fail rates. Look at things that weigh what it is to say that this school should be a school. Like I think that that's something that we definitely should look at in depth and not just kind of throw it out there, because this issue isn't going away. It's probably going to get, I mean, we hope it gets better with the new testing and the fact that we've gotten rid of the practical, but that's why it's going to get worse, because there's no longer any practical. There is only the testing. And so the comprehension of the student versus how the teacher, the school is teaching is going to have a huge impact on the next set of data that we get, because now we're fully up to getting the students with 1,000 hours and written test only.
Right.
Well, how quickly can the staff act? I'm sure you've got notes on this already. How quickly can the staff act on new regulations?
Well, funny you should ask. We've already started.
Okay.
But I can tell you that it's a big project. We've started internally thinking that we need regulations to try to strengthen this program, much like we've done with the apprentices. And so internally, we've done that. We will need to meet with our legal counsel, our regulations legal counsel, and Sabina as well, to really get the regulatory language put together for that. But so I'm hoping by spring we should hopefully have something to provide to this committee. Something else the committee could consider is going a little further and setting up or asking me to set up a task force to bring in experts to work with some of the schools to try to set up these regulations as well. I'm certainly not an education expert. And so that might be a possibility as well, is establishing a working group that really, once we have these regulations kind of drafted of what we'd like to see from a staff's perspective, is then bringing in some experts in the industry to help us along with that as well.
I think that's a great idea, because at the end of the day, not everyone on the board is part of understanding the education side.
Absolutely.
So I definitely think which is why I'm so passionate about this issue, because because understanding the industry, understanding, just what's going on, it's frustrating to see that, I mean, and again, I know of a lot of schools out there that are really working hard to create top-notch education, who hold their students accountable for showing up, who hold their teachers accountable we know that. But the ones that aren't are definitely not, they're holding a space that maybe someone else could have.
Right.
Can I just add, I wouldn't just look at people that are experts in the field of cosmetology. I would also look at teachers that are experts in teaching, because not everyone can teach. You may know your field and you may know your business, but not everyone can get that across in a way that people can understand, and then also like replicate on a test.
I totally agree.
This is obviously like everything else we have to deal with. It's not a 30-day fix that
Right.
we're talking about. Maybe what we should do is really we can do nothing more than to start this process rolling and keep the board involved in this, is maybe report back to the board at our next board meeting of the discussions that we had today, show them some of our numbers, and at least let them start having some input into the process too. But it looks like it's going to come back to this committee next.
Yes.
Before it goes to the boards. But let's at least keep the board informed that we're having the discussion. And the numbers are so significant, they need to know the numbers too. So.
But
Yes, and at our, go ahead, Tanya.
So I was just going to say, I think that we should really have like a timeline on how we want to map this out, because the reality of it is that testing is done every single day. Right. And so the longer we go, then the longer we have this issue of our statistics and things changing. And the longer we have these schools out here that aren't performing, that are still in operation. Not that we're trying to let me clarify that. Not that we're gung-ho to go put a school out of operation, no. But what I'm saying is that the accountability needs to come sooner than later.
And I will say that obviously regulations do take time. If a regulation package gets through in a year, that would be a miracle. But from our staff's point, we are happy to say that we are fully staffed right now in this area. We have a great new regulations analyst, Sam, who is with us, who is dedicated to this task. So we are definitely in a better position than we were, say, 6 months ago on trying to get some information back to this committee.
And are you saying that other than statute and regulation, there's nothing we can do now? Are we that bound? There's no way we can intercede with these extremely low pass rates and do something even on an emergency basis to try and get involved in that problem?
There is, I believe there is nothing that we can do aside from working with the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary, which I have already talked to their bureau chief about this subject, and we'll be meeting with them to talk about some of these very low pass rates. But again, we're talking about a bureau who has their own workload as well. And so I have no idea what their workload is and how quickly they would be able to look into some of these schools.
Can we have our council intercede here and try and look at what we have right now, if there's any other alternative to move on a more emergency basis here? But I agree with Tanya, we're backtracking here, and it's going to be a long time we're doing that. It would be nice to have some positive movement up front. Maybe our legal counsel can come back with an idea there.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I can.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I had to travel to get power and internet, so I'm glad it all worked out. Like Christy said, our hands are slightly tied a little bit right now. You don't want to end up in an underground regulation type of situation, or violating any other kind of law. And it's kind of a delicate situation here because we have the Bureau, who has one part in this, and then you have the board who has another part. So it's hard to act on our own when they have such a role with the schools. Obviously, we're all Regulations Council and myself are obviously very happy to participate in the conversations when need be between the two entities as well.
I will say also that we are just getting back, starting to do joint inspections with the Bureau. So this is something that we can do. We can work with the Bureau in trying to target some of these low performing schools. We also have a caseload of schools. So we do get complaints from students or consumers on schools, and we're working with the Bureau to start establishing joint inspections with our staff on that as well. So we are trying to do something, but it's not what we would like.
We have a joint committee already set up. Obviously, they must know the difficulty that we're having on this. What has been their what has been the relationship like? They're willing to share more information and perhaps change some regulations. Are they opposed to this? Do they want to do that themselves? I mean, we've been trying for years to get involved in this, taking it over entirely, and it just hasn't worked. So now we're kind of piece by piece looking at it for the betterment of our licensees. What is their position?
Well, I can't say what their position is on if we were to ask for sole oversight. I don't, we haven't had that discussion. We've had a lot of discussions with the Bureau on some joint cases that we are involved in right now. We actually have worked together on a pretty major case for a school that will hopefully be able to have some public exposure on in, say, the next month or so. So the Bureau has definitely been working with us. And again, they actually were the ones that recommended to me to provide them with a list of these low performing schools so that they could look at it. But in all fairness, I do know that the Bureau has experienced a lot of staffing issues, as we have in the past. We're almost completely fully staffed in our office, so we're super excited about that. But I do know that the Bureau has gone through a significant staff turnover rate as well. So I know they are dealing with those restrictions as well.
Well, what are the committee members? What are your individual opinions as to where we should go now with this? Obviously, we've got to get some information to the board. Even a timeline may be difficult to get to them right now until we get more specifically how we're going to deal with the situation. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, as I said before, I mean, it's definitely like every time we get to this subject, we're opening up a new can of worms. So now it's just deciding on, I mean, I think it's disheartening coming from that, like being an industry member, seeing these numbers, the statistics for me is disheartening. But the flip side is that this is the order of business that's been going on for so long that it should be no longer acceptable. So my biggest concern now is, what do we need to do as a unit to start taking action to remedy some of the concerns that we have? Because as you know, we get blamed for everything. Oh, the board did this, the board did that,
Yes,
so
yes.
it's not going to change. So if we're going to get blamed for stuff, we might as well really get in there and make some decisions on how to proceed to make things better, right? Because at the end of the day, we want more people passing, getting into the field that they love. We don't want to compromise consumer safety, but we also want to hold the schools accountable for their students. And that is the biggest thing. And that's why you have a lot of people who end up, working from home or, not getting their license and all these things, because they start to get discouraged and they find a back door. And looking at these numbers, I see why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
All right. So
I would
this
say-
item, I guess.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, you're on any given test, on any given exam, you're going to have a bell curve. You're going to have students that pass at an absolutely high rate, and you're going to have people that are going to not pass, not even come close to passing. So I'm interested. Obviously, I'm interested to see if this data that we have, does it fall along a bell curve? Because if it does, then that's pretty natural and pretty normal. Not that makes us feel good about people not passing, because you obviously want people to get into this career because they feel passionate about it, but that's pretty normal. And there isn't much that you can do about that. On the topic of schools and accreditation and that whole concept of accreditation, I can tell you that even in public school, schools get accredited and they still have lots of kids that don't pass. They still have lots of students that don't graduate from high school, that don't finish that don't finish. So I know that we see this as kind of a big problem for us because we want people to get their licenses, but all of this is very normal in terms of what happens in education.
Yolanda, let me just say to that point, I totally agree with you. I think the concern is when you have a school who constantly puts out very low passing rates. Because there's one thing to have the bell curve where you have that up and down. But if you have a school that's constantly at, I mean, let's say if we use 35%, 40%, who's constantly below that is where the concern is for me.
I agree with you, but like we've already covered, unless we have the authority to pull their teaching program, I don't think that that's going to stop. And we need to figure out where it is that we have the authority to actually make change. Otherwise, we're going to keep going around and around and around on this topic like we have been almost every time. And I'm not mad about it. I just feel like if we can't get anywhere and we can't do anything, it's going to continue. We're just going to continue to talk about this, but not actually accomplish anything.
Well, I think our reporting to the board has to be that we're in discussions about this, that staff is preparing suggestions on regulations that could help solve this, give them a time frame that's going to be. You said is there anything you want immediately from the board, any kind of resolutions you want from the board that would be helpful to you to get through this terrible problem?
Well, I think the board would need to vote if we want to ask for any statutory authority, whether it's sole oversight, whether it's just a fee, whether it's a renewal process. The board would need to vote.
But that's going to happen later.
I think it could happen now. And the reason why I think that is because regardless of what we do with the regulation process could take some time, but so could the legislative process. We would have to find an author. We're not anywhere near our sunset review, where this is sometimes, often in the past, when the board has asked for sole oversight, it's been through the sunset review process and obviously hasn't been successful. Should the board decide they want to continue that journey, that's something that the board would have to look for an author for. And even a fee or a renewal process is something that we would have to find an author for now. So I think that's something that the board could discuss at the next meeting. When it comes to the regulations, I think that's work staff's going to have to do and bring back to this committee.
Right. Okay. All right. So really, it's just
with that, I think that this committee today could vote on, and Sabina, correct me if I'm wrong, but they could make a motion for the board to ask for a fee and renewal process with statutory authority for a school fee and a renewal process.
Sabine, sorry, I thought I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
This isn't agendized for action today. However, as everybody knows, your illustrious staff has been taking copious notes, and we can definitely, it can also be a board meeting item, agenda item as well. But however, we can't make any type of movement like that today from the committee.
Oh, okay.
But that doesn't stop it from coming to the board anyway, because I know I know staff was already working on this type of issue anyway. So they just won't have direction or recommendations from the committee that are official.
But we would have a report from the committee.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I believe that's already on the agenda.
Exactly. Okay.
Perfect. Yes.
okay. So, do we need any sort of resolution? We just move this through as a discussion item onto the board then?
Correct. And if there's no further discussion from the committee members, I would recommend, or I think it's required, that we
Yes.
open it up for public comment.
Right. I was thinking we were at that point. So if that's the case, why don't we open it up now for public comment on this item?
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up WebEx's Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. You can look for the question mark icon in the lower right corner of your computer screen or behind the 3-dot other options on a mobile device. Type the word comment and click send, or you can always raise your hand to request to be recognized. Each person will have 2 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning. And I do see a couple of raised hands, so we'll call on those people first. There's someone logged into WebEx as Fred Jones. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. And you're unmuted. Go ahead, Fred.
Okay, super. Hi, it's Fred Jones with the Professional Beauty Federation. Well, good discussion, great work by Christy and her staff. I'm guided by one simple principle when it comes to schools. What is in the best interest of students? And I believe from a public policy perspective, the best interest of students will be best served by sole oversight of the state board over schools. There's way too much falling between the cracks, between the regulatory and statutory authority, between BPPE and the state board. There needs to be one clear sheriff in town, and given the importance and prominence of your board, and given that students reach out to you before they would ever reach out to BPPE, and given a host of other realities, we believe that one sheriff needs to be your state board. So if you're going to seek legislation, I hope you would start big and maybe compromise through the sausage mill process to something maybe a little less. I will say for good schools, the idea of paying more fees when they're already paying exorbitant fees to BPPE, and by the way, getting nothing in return, is going to be a little tough to swallow. And all of those fees will be passed on through higher tuition and therefore passed on to their students. So I just think from a public policy vantage point and from what's in the best interest of students, sole oversight remains the best approach. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to pass along information that the time limit has now been made to 4 minutes with a 30-second warning. So our next request for comment comes from someone logged into WebEx as Wendy Cochran. Wendy, I'm sending you an unmute request, and you'll have 4 minutes. And you're unmuted.
Hi, and your businesses as well. California Aesthetic Alliance has always supported sole oversight of the BBC as the sheriff in town, as Mr. Jones points out. Look, please don't beat yourself up anymore about this, BBC, because really the ball is not that much in your court other than inspections. This has nothing to do with the hours because the estheticians, the manicurists, and the electrologists, there's been no change in hours. It has nothing to do with COVID anymore, even though all the schools and all the students that I've interviewed in our group of over 8,000 licensed estheticians and students, they all blame COVID still. And this has been going on, we all know this, for way longer than COVID has been around and affecting things in the world. And honestly, this isn't the responsibility of the BPPE right now. They're very actively out there issuing requests for meetings with people that teach lash extensions and brow classes and body sculpting and things like that, and threat of big fines and citations for them to, monitor these private individuals that are teaching classes. But we don't hear much about the BPPE actually taking the onus and the responsibility for going into the schools and making sure that these consumers, these students that are paying a lot of money, are actually passing and being educated by competent instructors There are no requirements for instructors, and a lot of times they're just folks that are just graduated out of the program because they are taking, there's no license requirement for an educator in California either. And that would be something that could maybe that the BPPE and the BBC could come together and implement. But Yolanda's spot on. There's not everyone graduates. A lot of the competency issues that you're having is they don't comprehend what they're being taught in the actual classroom, which is how all this stuff works. They're not understanding what they're reading in their textbooks. They're not understanding their assignments, and they're just kind of pushing back on the fact that they might or might not be talented at doing the creative process that is the beauty industry. So I really feel that the onus should be more pointed at the BPPE and the responsibility of these students that are consumers paying thousands of dollars to get these through these programs, that the BPPE really step up or relinquish their power of managing these schools. So thank you very much.
And at this point, I do not see any other requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Please.
Thank you.
Let me understand then that what we're doing now is we're memorializing this to the board, but we're not doing it in a resolution form. We're just passing in our discussions through the next board meeting as to what occurred here, and let them know the depth of the problem. We don't have a specific resolution.
Correct. Not for this committee. We will continue to work. We will work on a regulation package and bring back to this committee, but we will put on the agenda an update of this committee. And we can also add to the agenda that we can, separately, we can have an agenda item that says the board can make a recommendation on a legislative change. Obviously, that's not how it's going to be worded. Is that right, Sabina? We would have it as like 2 different items on the board meeting agenda.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, let's do that. Let's move on to the next item there, item number 4.
So item number 4, I did kind of talk about already. We wanted to just provide this committee with an update that on December 5th of 2022, we had a Barber Town Hall meeting that was for schools, and the exam vendors gave an interactive review of the Barber exam. And we will be doing that with the cosmetology exam in the first week of February. We had over 100 people that attended that town hall meeting. We did it in person and virtually. And so that was our first hybrid meeting that we ever had, which actually went really well. We didn't have too many people show up in person, so we'll do the cosmetology one virtually. It seemed to be really helpful. People seemed very receptive and appreciative. And like I said, we have seen those Barber scores kind of go up already. So hopefully that will provide some assistance to the schools as well. So that was all we had on that agenda item.
All right. Shall we move to the next item and discussing the high school educational requirements?
Okay. On our next item, this was an issue that was brought up in a different meeting, and since it falls under the licensing and examination requirements, we brought it to this committee. And the discussion is we currently have, for the most part, a 10th grade education requirement. Other than our electrologist license, that does require 12th grade. And this discussion was regarding should that level of high school education be lowered to potentially facilitate more people being able to test into the industry. So that is open for this committee's discussion.
What are the opinions of our committee members?
I think that if I'm going to choose carefully, I think that if we lower our requirement to, let's say, for instance, 8th grade, I think we're going to see a drop in our passage rates because of perhaps critical thinking skills or reading ability, because we've already discussed the readability level of our licensing tests. But I don't see how this could lead to more people in the industry actually passing the exams. But that's just me on the education level.
No, I'm with you on that education level. I think we should throw caution to the wind when it comes to lowering the standard of where we are now, especially seeing where we are now on the overall test scores, test site. That would be also requiring a change in the educational teachings that I think will be highly effective, not in a positive way if that happens.
I would agree with you.
And another thing that we might consider, I mean, not completely against dropping the level that's required, that in the United States, we require students attend school compulsory through 12th grade, but there are other countries in the world where that is not the standard. So that would be my only caveat to lowering the education level, is that we remember that we also have people from out of our country that are possibly wanting to get their licensing, and in their countries, they may not have to have gone to school through 12th grade.
It seems to be the consensus maybe that we don't modify any of these numbers today. So maybe we won't take action on this.
I think that's fine. I would open it up for public comment, though.
Let's do that. Let's open it up for public comment now.
And this is the moderator, and we are opening the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If there are any comments on this item, you can raise your hand, or you can look for the WebEx Q&A feature and type the word comment and click send. And we do have a request for comment from Wendy Cochran. To confirm, would we like to limit this to 2 minutes again?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Everyone will have 2 minutes to speak. And Wendy, I'm sending, my apologies. Let me do that again. Sending you a request to unmute yourself, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I would agree. If the issue is comprehension, especially in the space, if I speak directly about aesthetics, if the issue is comprehension of what we're doing and being able to read the instructions correctly and understand what chemistry to apply to what situation, lowering your standards of education will be problematic, and you will see lower pass rates. Yolanda is spot on. Once again, thank you very much for your comments. And thank you.
And I do not see any other requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Please do.
Thank you.
And we should open public comment on items that are not on the agenda.
And we are reopening the public comment feature. If anyone would like to mention a topic that was not on the agenda, this would be your opportunity. You can raise your hand, or you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment into that text box, and click send. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that now?
Please.
Thank you.
And the next item would be for committee members that have any suggestion for agenda items for the next meeting. And I'm sure there'll be a continuation of our exam pass rate discussion. Yes. That's certainly going to be there. It's going to be with us for a while. Is there anything else that the committee members would like to bring up at our next meeting?
Well, along with that, and just kind of map out a plan for what we're looking at as far as regulation is concerned. what that means for the board, how our involvement can be in that.
Yes, we can do that.
There's some
Okay.
sort of time projection.
We can do
Right,
that.
just to give us an idea. I mean, even though we know it's going to take a minute for the regulations to get passed, but we still kind of need to have an idea on where we're going and what that looks like for us as a
Definitely.
whole. Yeah.
Any other items that you would like to have added to the next agenda? If not, I think that we should adjourn.
Thank you so much.
In concurrence, yes.